Hello, everyone. Welcome to our podcast, Under the Banyan. And today I'm privileged to speak with one of our professors. To give you a small insight, it was my first audit course here. And one learning that I want to share with all of our listeners is there was an activity performed where four people were chained together, had to hold hands and run across the room. And the question proposed to us was whose speed determines the speed of this group? And the answer that came out from that was it was the one who ran the slowest. And the learning that we all got from that was in any system, the health of the weakest link determines the strength of the system. And with that, I would like to welcome our very own professor, Dr. Amar KJR Nayak. Welcome, sir, to the podcast.
Thank you.
Sir, you started with an engineering degree from NIT, and then you did your management from IIM Bangalore. Then you did your PhD from IIT. Then you did your postdoc from Japan, Kobe University, Japan. So how did you end up working in the farms of rural Odisha?
One of the reasons for our coming back to Odisha and not India was to do something in Odisha, something better. So I was having my full scholarship in Kobe University for a doctoral program. I had cleared the first go. But by then I had got an idea. I finished my master's, another master's in Kobe. So the research topic was clear. I knew what to do or how to go about broadly. So I said I had done that work. So I didn't want to spend more time in Japan. And we wanted to come back to Orissa and not to India. Because coming back to India was being anywhere else in the world. So, but then you don't get this opportunity to actually do what you want to do. So I continued with the studies on multinational corporations. But in the process, during that time, I was visiting different parts of Orissa. And one of the very large projects that I was assigned to work for CAG was to actually study the impact of RLTAP schemes in the 8 poorest districts in Orissa. And that's what one of the papers you studied on participation and development outcomes. So that study led me to move to around 50 blocks of southern Orissa and the KVK districts, 8 districts of KVK. So that gave a good insight to rural Odisha. So the question was always there, is the design of multinational corporation the best design for society? It was surely giving a lot of profits to the shareholders of a company, but it didn't seem to me so, looking at the way corporations worked. Because after engineering, I worked as a design engineer in a very large public sector company. And even after my MBA, I worked in corporate world. I never wanted to work in Reliance, given the history of Reliance. But I worked there. Again, I went inside and saw the internal operations of the farm. So the studies of multinational corporation and the practices of these corporations was showing me that that's probably not the design which is good for the whole society. So there was always a desire to see how to change this design of organizations, which is not only good for the shareholders, but also good for the stakeholders. What is there a design which can help both the shareholders and the stakeholders, and not just one group of people in an organization? So this question had been there in the mind, and I was looking at trying to tell large corporations how they should redesign. But they were all, they were not responding to these suggestions. So I realized that there's no point wasting my time trying to suggest what is appropriate. Not knowing much, that I didn't know much about it, but I had some idea only then. But nevertheless, no one heard about it. They were just quiet about it. So the next step, and I had a lot of interest in research methodology as a subject of study. And when I came into Bhubaneswar, my first subject was quantitative methods and subsequently social research methods. So while I was okay with doing well in my doctoral program for both quantitative methodologies and qualitative methods or methodologies, I had that capability given in the university. So that was my strength of methodology. So I said, look, if this is not where it's going to work, we should find some other alternatives where we should test the design. So that's how I started looking at farmer producer organizations. So when we got a funding from NABARD in 2009, and I had already gone off on postdoc to Japan. So when I got the approval for the funding, I left my postdoc and came off. I had to tell my professor, I have to go back. I've got something to do. And so I was supposed to be there for at least 6 months. My professor then said, okay, if you have to, then he let me come on after 3 months. And so the research began on farmer producer organizations, which is basically looking at design of organizations at the bottom of the pyramid, not at the top of the pyramid for the multinational corporations, but the design of small corporations and how they could be redesigned to actually make a better organization. I initially started trying to use some of the design features of a corporation, but discovered that that's not the way it will function for the farmers. So that's again a long story of the process, but that led to understanding that, well, you can have a great design of organization, which became anyway, finally or subsequently became a national policy on farmer producer organization. The studies out of that landed up into becoming a national policy. It has shaped a lot of design features, FPO policy and FPO design. But I realized that even if you have a great design of organization, this organization has to be fed with the raw material and the final product. Unless it has the products, the FPO will not be operational. So then the question of production came. So how should farmers produce so that they have a sustainable supply chain? And the supply was a problem in the production, in the FPO. So, and since we were working in one of the toughest geographies or toughest districts of Orissa, and that was also a design method, that we should work in the most difficult conditions so that we understand the different variables that actually play out. If it is a good ecosystem, we won't be able to discover the challenges. So the design was to work in the most toughest. One is, of course, an emotional feeling, but from a designer's angle, it's the best situation or location to work. So since we were working in this district of Raigada, which is one of the KBK districts, we chose Raigada because it was the closest to my office in Bhubaneswar. All other districts are furthest away from this place. So that is not short distance is 350 kilometers, but that's the closest. So looking at the limitations of the supply, I entered into production. That is where farming came in. So then you go into this world of agriculture and you find a lot of flaws. And because of the design in agriculture, the production was not consistent in the farmer's hand. So you can see farmer suicide, reducing returns to farmers, climate change issues, and the viability of farming was, as you see in India and world over, is actually in a very critical situation. So the issues of how to produce became the center of analysis. And that's how you find me in the farms of Orissa. So a long answer to your question.
No, sir, that's you. Please feel free to take all the long answer that you want. So I was going through a paper on sustainability of FPOs. And when I started searching more about FPOs, one thing that I saw was now bigger players are entering the FPO market. Players like ITC, Grant Thornton, and other consulting agencies are entering as CBPOs, and they're partnering up with bigger players like Adani Enterprises. So now one thing that happens with this is there is an assurance of fixed buyers and bigger markets. There is an assurance of that. Definitely there is an assurance. But is this the way forward for FPOs and FPCs?
So this is a very complex issue people needs to understand. You have to see what is that the purpose of farmer-producer organization. The purpose of farmer-producer organization is to make the farmer better off. What do you mean by better off? The farmer should produce well, at lower cost, and should get a fair price for his produce. Now, if your architecture of marketing or connecting farmers or produce or farming to markets could be local markets, it could be national markets or international markets. When you think of ITC, you are basically looking at its international business division to connect to the international markets. Now, if this architecture, any of this architecture, if meets these two purposes, then it's great. But now you go and look at empirical data. Does it meet the purposes? That is, enhance farmers' net income and reduce the cost of production. It doesn't do. World over, historically. So what's the problem? In the architecture, in the design, so it's all boils down to what is the design of FPO and what is the design of an MNC. And now an MNC might think that I can source material for farmers sustainably, but if the farmer doesn't perform, will he be able to source his raw material? It cannot. Very simple. But how does it continue to? And that, if you want to understand, you go into what you call Raymond Werner's wonderful work on international product cycle. So it is an international division of labor in the world. Now you can connect it to Marx then. When you talk about labor and production, then you can connect to the ideas of Marx. But this is already reflected subsequent in the 70s. Raymond Werner wrote a very beautiful piece which talked about international product life cycle or international division of labor. So what the large corporation do is, today I'm getting tomatoes for farmers in Gujarat. And once they become unviable in 2 to 3 years, I will go and procure tomatoes for farmers from Odisha. So it is maintaining its supply chain by moving its sourcing from point to point. But the farmer who was supposed to be connected is actually left out. So you're feeding the system or the intermediary network, but it is not ensuring that the supplier is stable and profitable. So there are many design issues there. This is where policies have actually not understood this whole complex. That's where system science becomes very helpful, to see the complexity of production to organization, to small organization, to large organization, the services sector, the processing units. So there are these 4 aspects that is coming in here. You have an FPO. You have an MNC, that is a large corporation. Then you have in between the production itself, the agricultural production. Then you have processing, because in the agricultural produce moves long distances, it needs to be preserved. So you need processing. Then having done processing and stored and reached to markets, then you have to again distribute. That's services. So all these 4 layers, they have to have harmony. If there is no harmony, you will have a suboptimal solution. And currently, the suboptimality is so high, the farmers have to commit suicide. I don't know if it's making sense, but
it does make sense. So I wanted to also understand from you, what are the major policy making flaws currently related to farming? If you can summarize in
one simple term Mr. Modi has used is one district, one product. ODOP. And because of which I declined to sign the last FPO policy, or I removed my name. I asked them to remove my name from that policy because of this ODOP. The The concept of ODOP is one district, one product. Now we have to understand the science of agriculture, science of sustainable agriculture, science of regenerative agriculture, to then be able to say that ODOP is a flawed, it's a dangerous policy statement or policy approach to agriculture and farmers in any country, not just India. If the principle do not work for agriculture, it is not good for India or Bhutan or China or America or Europe or anywhere.
So in my limited understanding, for example, ODOP is one district, one produce. So, for example, if somebody is planting sugarcane in a particular district, so sugarcane takes more water. So obviously that district will be water deficient. The groundwater will go much down. So that is why it is very bad. For example, there is no diversity in the crops. In a particular area, there would be no diversity in crop. There will be no crop regulations. Is that the main issue with ODOP?
Yeah. So it is. This is where you have to gradually get into systems thinking to understand how systems work, how farming works, or how an organization works, or how a governance system works, or how institutions work. So if you just look at just a very reductionist way of an issue, and you will get only a part of that answer, will not get the full effect. So when we think of agriculture as a system, there are at least 5 critical factors. One is, as you said, diversity of produce in a farm. The second is, of course, you need water for farming. The third is you need soil for farming and soil nutrients in the soil. You can also do aquaponics, which does not require soil, but the cost and the feasibility of that is questionable. So soil is an important one, and the fourth one is the genetic stability of the seed or plant, and the fifth is the ecology of the farm. So if all these 5 factors have to be balanced, if they are in balance, your cost of production goes down. Now, what is the concept of diversity that you raised? The concept of diversity is not that you have 100 acres of land and you have 5 varieties of crops in 20 acres each. That's not the notion of diversity. The notion of diversity is every plant requires diversity. That means it has to grow along with other plants. Just like if suppose there was 100 ritaces in one room, would you like that kind of a condition? Or there are many types of people along with which retace also is there.
Definitely the latter.
Or if you say that no, we'll put 100 retace in one hall and another 100 of Disha in another room. And you say we have diversity. And another 100 of Amar in another room. And we say we have diversity. Or you'd like all the 3 in one room.
Definitely.
So we have to understand how plants grow, how food gets produced. Suppose we say bees are in one box, 20 kilometers away, trees are in another place. So it is the interaction of these different species which become the basis of production. So when you say one district, one product, what you're signaling is that one district will specialize in one item. That means all farmers are likely to or given incentives to produce only tomato or only potato or only cabbage. Of course, the policy would say, no, we don't mean that everyone should produce only tomato. They can produce other things, but they will largely produce tomato because the weather of this area is suitable for tomato. The next question is, okay, do they produce tomato throughout the year? Not possible. So what do they do for the rest of the 9 months? Is it feasible to the farmer? You are basically making the farmer incompetent by signaling that this area is for tomato or for potato. Recently, the government of Odisha Minister of Agriculture said the potato mission is a failure. It should fail. Any mission, any product-based mission will fail because of the economics of how it functions, the science of how production takes place. If you didn't have that idea, you are a stupid policy leader. Or you better rely on some scientists who can give you guidance on how nature operates. So now another part. This is when you say, okay, for 9 months you grow one crop, for 3 months you grow one crop, but you're growing lots of it, so you have value addition, so on and so forth. It will take you for 6 months. No, because you produce and then you also do processing. You're covered for 6 months. What happens to the rest 6 months? So first is that part. Suppose you have a factory which only produces tomato, and in a village you will have a processing unit. It will produce, will finish the work for 6 months, and then after 6 months, what will the factory do? What will you do with the employees who are working in that? How will you pay them? Who will pay them? They'll leave. Then again, next round, you want to get a new set of people to work next year. Will it be financially viable to operate this way? The second part of monocropping is when you produce one crop and take it to the market in bulk, how does the market behave with you? How will the trader behave with you?
Low price.
Low price. So demand supply is simple. As the supply increases, the demand reduces, the price drops. And this is exactly what the market wants. The intermediary wants. The intermediary wants that you produce in bulk so that he can press you to sell it at throwaway price.
The negotiation power is with him.
Because this item is perishable.
Definitely.
So you have created a system to systematically kill the farmer and in the process, the production of food. And therefore, OLEOP is a disaster for the country if applied properly. The good thing is in India, most of the things don't get applied properly. So we escape the risk.
Talking about systems, most of your work is in AIESS. Currently that we're working on is all interacting evolving system sciences. We'll definitely attach a link to the papers for our listeners. I also wanted to understand from you, what do you see the potential of AISS? What are the existing frameworks currently working that you think that AISS will definitely remove them?
So we have the first is the market-based economy as a framework we have. The market will decide the rest of it, and we know the limitations of letting market operate when basically you get into chaos and say it will settle on its own. In a natural system, in a physical system, that's how it would work. But if you are thinking of human beings in a chaotic environment, then it's a very risky, unethical practice. And that's what we are seeing, that there is rising inequality, rising tensions, unsustainable markets and economy with the competition coming in. So competitive market economy is one of the frameworks. The second framework is the socialist framework, or, so you say that, okay, social economy, or welfare state, which is what you say, that's another framework that you say. But again, we have seen the limits of welfare economy. So the state takes the responsibility to support the society. I mean, it's a very broad, of course, the deeper sense of it is very different, but the way it has been applied is having its limitations. And the third one we talk about is circular economy, which is basically largely focused on transactions of material. So you basically are trying to ensure that your wastages are minimized, or you make use of the waste that is created from the production system. So as the waste gets created, you're trying to find space where you can use the waste material. So you're trying to balance the mass conservation and energy conservation in this process. So it's a material or economy-based idea of circularity. So while you have it's a good improvement over the material engagement or process, but it has left out the social, it has left out the environmental, it has left out the political aspect of it. So if the other three are also aligned to these material movements, then circularity will also be fine. And then we have also socio-ecological systems. So we say that, okay, now it's just not material, but it is socio-ecological. So you say that, okay, you will take care of social and ecological, and that will solve the problem. Whereas in any ecosystem, we have all these four interacting. It's not only economic, it is also social, it is also political, and it is also environmental or ecological. So none of the current frameworks look at all the four. AIESS takes all the four into account. It has ecology at the core, social relationships at the second layer, and then political, which includes both institution and governance. Then it brings in the economic layer, which is actually a manifestation of the first three layers. And the economic layer includes four dimensions, which includes agriculture, secondary production or manufacturing, then processes or process or services industries, and then you have organization, which is what engages is any of the three economic activities, either one of the economic activities or all the three economic activities. So economics include four layers in that design, whereas the other foundational ones are another four layers, which includes ecology, relationships or social, and it goes into institution and governance. So AISS tries to take all the critical pillars of human society and tries to find a synergy across them, or tries to find harmony across them. And if we can establish a harmony and coherence across these different systems, that system is likely to perform the best.
So if I talk about the two most prevalent frameworks currently, social or the welfare state framework or the market economy. If I talk about these two frameworks, which also, like you also mentioned, it works in the physical state. Now, despite the checks and balances, still people have exploited these systems. Does AIESS give an safeguard, innate safeguard from these exploitations?
So if you want to seek harmony across these four critical pillars, it is also saying, now taking you deeper into saying that these are pillars, and if I take it to a level of dimensions, there are 8 dimensions. And now I say that you need harmony across these 8 dimensions. Then again, this is too complex. So you say, okay, what are the factors in each of these dimensions? So there, when you go for these 8 dimensions, there are a total of 40 factors. So what it is then asking in from design point of view is that coherence across these 40 factors. If you can establish coherence across these 40 factors, then you will have a much superior regenerative or harmonious system. So in other words, if going back to the previous example that you were referring to, we were talking about FPO design, and we were talking about production and then marketing. And if I were to actually design an organization which is harmonious to regenerative agriculture or sustainable production, then it is going to be diversified farming. Suppose I take diversification as the basis of good farming. If I adopt diversified farming, then what should be my organizational design? Can it be a specialized company, or should be a diversified company? Are you making sense of it? So if I have consistency between primary production to primary organization, even there my product market strategy of the farm, should it be a single product strategy of the farm or multiple product strategy of the farm? So this is the coherence you are establishing. So my production is diversified, and my product basket strategy also has to be diversified in order to see that they're coherent. And if I have this coherence, I'm just talking about 2 levels now. If I have coherence like this across, this is fabulous. You make heaven on earth. So if you now empirically look at data of FPOs with diversified, do they perform better, or FPOs with single product, do they perform better in terms of net returns to farmers? Don't forget that. Not in terms of revenue turnover, but the net return to farmers, because that's the objective of an FPO. So empirical data would tell us that FPOs with diversified product service actually gives far higher return to farmers than single product. The best example is Amul. Amul is how many products?
Single. Dairy-based product, but many products.
But now you say the product that it takes from a farmer is single or many is single. But it's a very good company. It's a large company, a large cooperative, one of the best cooperatives in the world. Now you look at how much it is paying to the farmer. How much do you guess is it paying? 10,000. It's not more than 3,500 per member per month. But there are cooperatives in Gujarat, like Amar said, which works on multiple products and services. It pays over 9,000 rupees per farmer per month. It operates only in 12 villages. Amul works in the whole state and markets all over the world, and all over India. So if you go into the coherence in design at one layer and design in the other layer, and the other layer and the other layer. So as you increase the coherence, your resilience is extremely high. If you're not coherent, you get into chaos. And if you're in chaos, it's good for big players. So the big players would like chaos.
So to simplify this a bit for our listeners, are you trying to say that if there is a coherence established between all the layers, design coherence established between all the layers, it will be difficult for people to exploit. It will have a resilience.
There is no concept of exploitation in a coherent system. This notion of exploitation is in a imbalanced system.
Definitely.
So the whole terminology that we have is to be also, that's where we had another, I don't know if you read that paper, but maybe I'll give you that paper on the language, logic, and values of competition and cooperation. So we'll do that in your second year. It's a very interesting way to see what is the language, the logic, and the values of competition are different from cooperation. So if you are thinking of cooperation, there has to be coherence in the language, in the logic, and in the values. If you don't distinguish them and try to make a hybrid of it, it will give you suboptimal understanding and results. So your question of why there is exploitation is because of lack of coherence. When the market systems and the other models, there is lack of coherence because lack of understanding. And because of these asymmetries, there is a scope for exploitation. So the argument that I hope you're getting to is, if you can design systems well, the exploitative nature would get eliminated. Or there are people already in this system who wants to basically exploit, and therefore they create asymmetries. Like in a stock market. Will the stock market function if there is symmetry of information? Theoretically, suppose there is information symmetry, will the stock market function? Will it function? Give a moment to reflect. If everyone knows everything, will people bet?
No, there's no arbitrage. There's no arbiter.
So if you want the stock market to function, you basically create systems of asymmetries of information. So the insiders create that and make the money. And the retail investors always lose. So our business is about creating asymmetry and then exploit the system. So either you are the big player. If you are a big player, you will like to have asymmetries. But if you are a person who wants your long-term happiness, joy, then you will try to remove asymmetries. So some parts of the explanation, but I'm just giving you some.
So moving on to the ethical foundation of AIESS. So there is other-centeredness that you talk about. Now, if people follow other-centeredness, social political conflicts would definitely be solved. If you think about others, solving conflicts will become much easier. And existing frameworks, if I talk about communism or any other existing framework, they also made that assumption to a certain extent that if people think about the others, they do not get greedy. So then most of the problems will be solved. AIESS, to a certain extent, also takes into account that if people become other-centered, then these things will work. If other frameworks which took that assumption did not work, how can we think that this assumption will be achievable, or to a certain extent it is practical that people will think about the others?
So the first question there would be, why should I be other-centered?
And to add one more part, as other-centered is not also innate to human beings. Like if we talk about our own evolution. Other-centered is not innate to us, and that is also a barrier for other frameworks, that it did not apply in their cases. So why are we taking that assumption, and how do we think that it is achievable in our case in AIESS?
So that's also a question, that whether other-centeredness is natural or artificial. And what you're saying, it is artificial. It is a prescription that you are suggesting, and that if you follow this, then it will be good. So that's one part of the argument. The second part is that why should I be other-centered? What will the benefit I have if I become other-centered? If I don't have a benefit, why should I be? Why should I worry about others? Very simple question. Why should I be worried about others? What is that I gain by being other-centered? Different ways you can ask this question. If I were to get an answer that there is actually a logic for my being better off by being other-centered, then it makes sense. So it cannot be a prescriptive. It has to be a logical, if there is any logical explanation to this. That how does it help me to be other-centered? Now I'll take a simple example. I think I'll share that, but build this very, very successful farmer. And this farmer would always produce the best of pumpkins. And he'd always get an award for, producing the best of pumpkins. This farmer was asked, how do you actually get prize all the time? What is your secret to success? So he said, I give my best seed to other farmers. He's competing in the market for prize, but he says, my secret to success is giving my best seed of pumpkin to other farmers around me. How do you explain this?
That doesn't seem to be
logical.
Right? It is giving the best seed to others. How is he getting the best part there?
So this is if you answer this, you'll probably see that why should I be concerned about others? Is it good for me by being good to the others? So now you have to understand how production takes place, how pumpkin gets produced, what is the interrelationship of one with the other. Suppose, how do we get a pumpkin? First you have pumpkin, you sow a pumpkin, then there is the biomass, the degree, and then you have flowers. And then how does flower become fruit? As a student of biology, you'll say it is the pollination. The flower, from flower to fruit, happens because of pollination. So now we say, okay, how do pollination take place? Who does the pollination? The bees. So do they have boundaries of going to which flower and which flower? No. So suppose the other farmer, your neighboring farmer, has flowers out of bad seed. What happens to your flower? Pollination
falls down. It's bad.
Right? So there is this understanding of interdependence, that in nature there are no boundaries. It's an open system. You can do it in a lab, but you have to do it manually, the pollination. That's very expensive. But thousands and millions of farmers are doing open pollination. A few are doing lab-based production, which is of course very expensive. So the first concept of understanding interdependence, that we don't produce anything on our own. We are, now if you go into the idea of interdependence, then you have those 4 axioms of AIESS, which says everything is interconnected with everything. Everything is interdependent with everything. And in your first introduction, you said, who determine the speed of the success of the group? The slowest who determine the speed. So if the seed of other farmer is poor, then that will determine the quality of the pumpkin this farmer gets. So for him to perform, he has to think of the other. So thinking of the other is beneficial to me. So it is a logical understanding of how I can be better off. It is in being good to the others that I will become better off. That's one simple understanding. When going back to AIESS axioms, we understand that in nature, everything is interconnected. Everything is interdependent. That is, from a human systems point of view, we are interdependent. And they interact. And because they interact, and in an open system, everything is interacting with everything. You create enormous number of possibilities, or what we call it evolves. So as you're interacting, you are evolving. So that the best example that you have is the COVID experience. So because the virus was mutating, it was evolving. So the scientists couldn't keep up with the type of virus that was coming out, and they could not really come out with a vaccine, because for any type of virus, you need some years of research to actually come out with a vaccine. So it was evolving so fast that it was impossible to keep pace with the research and come out with vaccine. So that's the typical nature that we have. That is, everything is connected, everything is interdependent, they're interacting, and therefore it is evolving. Now, this evolving or evolution is unpredictable because of the number of variables that are operating. So what you call uncertainty. So in your business language, you say VUCA, BANI, all these are aspects of reflecting uncertainty. So if everything is uncertain, what is the position of yourself in that uncertainty? How much are you responsible, or you have actual control on the system? Little to nothing. So in other words, the individual entity in a system is actually nothing. In a systemic lens, the individual entity in the universe is nothing. So this is not any spiritual or any, this is a very logical deduction that each of us or any entity in a system is actually nothing. Now, when I am nothing, I have to then say, when do I become something? I become something because of the others around me. Suppose none of you are here and I was talking like this. What would you consider me to be? I'm a mad guy. Yeah. You make sense of me or give me value because of your presence, because of the question that you ask, because of the nature of question that you ask. If you didn't ask these questions, and then I won't have the answer, or I won't have anything scope to speak. So you actually define me. I am nothing without the others around me. It's a logical deduction. So if I want my well-being, I should be basically concerned about the others. It's my own selfish interest for which I should be concerned about others. If this basic understanding was incorporated in any system, the competition, cooperation, wherever, it will perform. That will, of course, modify all the design issues in every system. But this is where the question of intentionality comes in. That how do I think of the others? That is my intention. Do I think that others are dependent on me? Or do I understand and appreciate that I am dependent on the other? So these are there in the human wisdom. The first one was in the African wisdom, which talked about ukama, which talked about interconnectedness. And then he talked about Ubuntu, which says I am because of the other. Or in the Indian Vedic philosophy, we have Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Taken in different ways, the interconnectedness and interdependence. Of course, they don't, of course, talk about interactions, but subsequently, physics has captured that pretty well, that there is interactions. And everything that we see is a function of interactions. Everything is evolving out of interactions. So, at the heart of my relationship with the others to interact is dependent on my intentionality about the other. So, whether it is other-centered intent or self-centered intent. If that farmer was self-centered intent, he can do as much as he wants, but he may not produce the best crop. But he's aware about the relationships, then he will actually go out to give the best seeds to others.
Thank you, listeners, for joining in. I hope you have gained a lot from this conversation. This was the first part of our dialogue with Professor Amar KJR Nayak, where we discussed about farmer producers organizations, the current state of farming and policies. We also discussed the AIESS framework, all interacting evolving system sciences, and its ethical foundations. Do join us in the next part, where we are going to talk about the philosophical foundations of AIESS, about free will, about religions, and many more. See you in the next episode.
When you're walking, even though you're walking slow, smash your bottle on the gravestone and live live while you can. That homeless brother is my friend.